Randy Sullivan is inner circle member, a very close friend, but what's really interesting about what Randy does, Randy is a physical therapist by trade, so it was magic when he came in and saw what we were doing as far as the functional movement screen and stuff. He goes, this is, he almost died and went to heaven. This is exactly what he believed in, and now he has taken what Randy is really good at is the practical application of things. And he has taken the whole program, very much like I hope all of you take this information and then apply it in your own way. Apply it in your own way. Instead of trying to, it's got to be your process, right? When you go work with your players, it's got to be your process. Not Freddie Corral's process, not Derek Johnson's process. It's got to be your process, and that's what Randy does really well. So no further ado, let's give Randy a round of applause and hear about how he does it the whole.
All right, thanks. I'm real excited to be here. Quick introduction of who I am, because a lot of you are like, who's that dude up there, man? Okay, so here's who I am. I am a physical therapist and a baseball coach. I've been each for about 20 years. I own the Armory Power Pitching Academy in Brandon, Florida, which is just in the suburbs of Tampa. When I just checked my phone, we're 82 and mostly sunny today. So I'm really happy to be here, though, and I know my physical therapy clinic is called Sullivan Rehab Services, and it's actually 3 doors down from my pitching academy, so I spend most of my day, walking back and forth. In the daytime, I'll see patients, and then when the kids get out of school at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock, we do sessions. I've never run a pitching lesson. I started doing this about 5 years ago, and it's always been a group setting. I've never had a one-on-one, hey, talk the guy through it. It's always been, I call it a motor learning academy, a motor learning environment more than a pitching academy. So a lot of people want to know, like, what's my baseball background? And, I'm 50 years old, and you kind of feel like a little bit of a dork talking about a baseball career that ended 26 years ago. But I was a catcher at the Citadel, which is the only military academy to ever make it to the College World Series, long after I was gone. If you look in the bowels of the media guide at the Citadel, you'll find me listed as the 4th or 5th all-time batting average leader, which meant nothing. My coach there, a Hall of Fame, ABCA Hall of Famer Chow Port, said to me that I led the league in insignificant hits. So if you had a guy, nobody on, 2 outs, need a single, before we get to 3rd out, I'm your guy, right? So I was a catcher there. I never pitched. But on the off days from catching, they had to find a position to play, so I learned to play every position because we didn't have a deep enough lineup to just take you out of the lineup. So I also have another distinction I think I'm really proud of. First of all, my senior year I did pretty good in school. They named me an academic All-American, but more importantly, I played every position on the field my last year of college, and I made an error at every position on the field in the NCAA Division I college baseball game, so I was consistent that way. So anyway, I began to research pitching after I was a physical therapist because my first child 22 years ago came out of the womb thrown with the wrong hand, and I figured we had to learn something else. So that's how I got into this, and I'm really proud to be here. I always know something great is going to happen when, as it approaches, you face resistance. The universe puts things in your way. So, I've owned my physical therapy practice for 20 years, and we have this healthcare change that's coming, and they've put all these recovery audit contractors out in the field. 7 hours before my plane was to depart yesterday to come here, in walks a guy with a Medicare badge and says, "We're here to audit your clinic." And so he came in and he spent the day looking at our place, and I'm proud to say we came out clean and green, no harm, no foul. The guy left and shook our hand and said, "All right, you guys are doing a good job." So I was like, whew. So anyway, that's when you know something good is going to happen when you face these. So here's my experience with holds, okay? We had been doing our pitching academy. We opened our doors in February of 2011 after I kind of messed around at Little League ballparks for a while. And we had some pretty good success. And I was, getting home at night about 8:30 after doing these sessions. And my experience with holds is a lot like your guys. Here I was sitting at the island in my kitchen eating a big giant bowl of banana pudding ice cream. You guys ever have banana pudding ice cream? It's like the 2 best desserts in the history of mankind on an all-star team. It's fantastic, fantastic. I think it's made by Bluebell. Highly recommend it. Anyway, I was eating banana pudding ice cream, and the story came on HBO, Real Sports, about Steve Delabar. Ron just alluded to it. And it was really, my reticular activating system was just on fire because it was such an emotional story about this guy who was out of the game and had this horrific injury. They showed the hardware of the x-ray and everything, and I'm like, wow, that dude. And so he's out of the game, and he's just hanging on to these balls and messing around in this academy in Kentucky, and he's holding him, and his velocity starts to climb, and the story goes on, and he makes it to the big leagues, and last year, I guess he was on the All-Star team. What an incredible story. He's throwing like 98 miles an hour after not even being able to pick up his arm, and he's crying, and his wife's crying, and I'm crying, and I'm like, all right, I got to find out about this hold stuff, right? And the thing that intrigued me about it was for years, I had been looking for a really good way to create functional strength in the decelerators on the posterior side of the shoulder. And we always were looking for that balance. And when Tom House started talking about the tennis racket thing, where he said the reason that, and I don't know if this is true or not, I haven't seen the data, I haven't seen the research, but I'm not asking for it. I don't ask for research. I just want results, okay? So he started talking about how the tennis players don't get as many shoulder injuries, and he thinks it's because they hang on to the racket. And I'm like, well, that sounds pretty cool. I never thought of that, because for years we've been trying to create that balance by doing, reverse throws and band work, working on the scaps and things like that. And so it really sounded like a neat idea to me because of the eccentric nature of the contraction that occurs when you do it. You guys know this. I'm probably boring you with this, but you have muscles can contract concentrically, which means the two ends are becoming closer together. The muscle's shortening as it produces force, or eccentrically, what they call in the gym a negative, where it's lengthening as it produces force. Now, an eccentric contraction is able to produce much more force than a concentric contraction. And so in a baseball pitch, the muscles on the posterior side of the shoulder, especially the small rotator cuff muscles, the infraspinatus, teres minor, teres major, even the rhomboids as you go to slow the scapula down, serratus anterior, which hugs it against the rib cage, those have to contract eccentrically. They have to be lengthening as they slow the arm down. And all the training we were doing was concentric, and so it wasn't functional. It wasn't applicable to what we were doing. So I did what I always do. Hello? All right, you're the man. Next slide. Here we go. I did what I always do, and I got on the internet. Just hit, the next arrow cursor or something. It should go. You with me? Hello? There you go. Right there, that little thing on the bottom. See the little thing on the bottom? There we go. I looked on the internet, okay? So you just been hired, okay? Cool. All right, I looked on the internet, and I am what internet marketers call a hyper-responsive buyer, okay? Honestly, that's how I came here. That's why I'm here, is because I'm a hyper-responsive buyer, because my journey down this road that led me to this stage today started with a click of the mouse on Ron's site. And I just thought about that while I was sitting out there. I was like, wow, that's pretty, how far we've come. Anyway, I started looking as soon, because I was still crying and eating banana pudding ice cream. Those are emotional events for me, right? And so I'm looking for this thing on the internet. I'm like, I got to find out about these holds. I'm looking, there's nothing. And a few months went by, and finally I found something on the NPA's website. And even though I'm a hyper-responsive buyer, I do have a price point and a wife, okay? And she would not have liked for me to spend what they were asking. Honestly, when I buy stuff, I usually spend more to get it overnight shipped to me, This whole digital download thing is really cool because now you can get it now. I don't have to wait. But I would spend more on shipping than I would on the actual product. But this was a little extreme to me. I looked at the product, and it was the towel thing and the balls and an algorithm for I just looked at it the other night, $455. I'm like, whew, really? Wow, it seems like a lot to me. So I did what I always do. I just kind of started on this thing. You're on it. So next slide. Good. And then about the time that I began to experiment with this whole holds thing, and all I did, I just kept replaying that part of the video. I taped it, and I kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I'm like, okay, they're doing something with a shuffle, and then they're doing another thing where they rock. And the brief little clips that they showed in the show, I was like, all right, I'll shamelessly steal like I always do. And so I just took those, and I said, all right, we're going to start doing these, and we started hanging on to balls. Well, in walked this guy. Actually, this is Dominic Monda. He was our first trial student. I call him our test pilot in the holds program. Dominic Monda, a left-handed pitcher. You can go to the next slide, please. And his brother actually contacted me. It's a really sweet story. His father had passed away when he was 9 years old. I had lost my father at the age of 15. I'm always amazed how many guys I attract that have experienced that kind of event in their lives. And Dom was one of them. His father had passed away when he was 9 years old. He was raised by his older brother. about 5 years older, who became his surrogate dad and took him to all his travel ball teams and coached him and helped him along the way. And he came to me and said, listen, my brother is not doing well. He's a left-handed pitcher at a junior college, Hillsborough County Community College in Tampa. And Dom came into us. He's a 5'9" musclehead, just one of those guys that looks like this, right? And he's all clawed. He's been doing a lot of bench press and everything, and he's really strong looking. And he's one of those guys that will walk by the weight room and get stronger, okay? But he was hurt. He was hurting. And his brother, they had him topping out at a whopping 76 miles an hour. He's a junior college freshman. I don't know that he would be able to start on your team, probably not. But he was complaining of posterior shoulder pain on a scale of 0 to 10. He rated it at an 8 out of 10. Okay, so he was really hurting. And so I asked Ron if I could do this, and I said, hey, Ron, would you mind? I released a product last night. You mind if can you reverse that? Can you go back? Because I want to do it again. I said, do you mind if I give my new product that I just put out, a subtle plug? And so I asked my website guy to send me some art, and go ahead. Bang, that's subtle, right? Is that subtle? Okay, anyway. We did what we always do. We did an assessment. And what this is telling you is that on my website at armorypitching.com, last night, I just released a new book and video called Engineering the Superhuman Pitching Machine, Volume 2. Volume 1 is about building a pitcher-specific motor. Volume 2 is about how to conduct a world-class assessment. And what I try to do is take the assessment that we do and break it down and make it really simple so that you guys could do it, so that you could take this thing and put it and apply it to your pitchers and go step by step. And it's really just an instructive way to teach you to kind of get through all the medical clutter and get through the fear of doing sort of a pseudo-medical analysis and to be able to conduct this, and you guys can find that. So that's my shameless, subtle plug, all right? So we did what we always do with everybody that walks in our doors. Within the first 2 weeks, everybody gets a head-to-toe assessment. And what it entails is just a brief orthopedic screen for common throwing-related injuries. We check for things like scapular dyskinesia, shoulder mobility, hip mobility, thoracic mobility, ankle mobility, lumbar range of motion, core strength. We do Gray Cook's functional movement screen to help us tweeze out those multifactorial deficits that you might find that you wouldn't find in the isolated tests. And then we do a video analysis, and we go frame by frame. And that's what the book does, and that's what we did with Dom. Now, Dom's... remember, he had posterior shoulder pain, which, I've heard Ron say this. If I had a whole day of posterior shoulder pain, we'd be home by lunch, right? Because they're really easy to fix. Posterior shoulder pain is a really easy thing to do. But he had pain with this move, horizontal adduction. He had scapular dyskinesia in that the rhythm and timing when his shoulder blades would rotate up. His left one would go up prematurely. And he had some asymmetrical winging. When you looked at him, his left shoulder blade, the muscle that holds it against the ribs is called the serratus anterior, and it was apparently weakened. I don't know whether it was just from overuse or improper movement patterns or whatever, but for whatever reason, maybe just because he had done so much work on the front side and not enough on the back. But he had this winging. He had a glenohumeral internal rotation deficit. That's the loss of internal rotation. He had a deficit in thoracic mobility. His lead hip had a hip internal rotation deficit. His Thomas test showed that he had tight hip flexors and tight quads, and his Ober's test showed that his tensor fascial lateral muscles on this lateral hip were tight. Next slide. Other than that, he was in pretty good shape, okay? And so he in the functional movement screen, he had issues with shoulder range of motion, deep squat, hurdle step, active straight leg raise, and rotational core stability. Go ahead. I'll try to get through this. His video analysis was really hard to do because he was in so much pain. Whenever he threw a ball, he said it felt like it was going to make him cry. And he's a tough kid. But in the video analysis, what we found was that he had poor pelvic engagement, sort of a tall and fall, up, down, and out kind of guy. Lead leg disconnect, and really, really bad decelerator. I'm not going to do it left-handed. I'm going to do it right-handed. But he was really good at finishing in the fielder's position. Okay, really good at finishing in the fielder's position. And interestingly enough, when he asked him to warm up, this is something to consider. If we're talking about decel today, if we're talking about holds as a decel pattern, I see the guys that come in here and they stand like this and they warm up like this, and the first thing they do is they go. And to me, that's just patterning a bad deceleration. So we don't ever let our guys warm up with the square feet. If anything, we'll have them turn wrong-footed so they can continue to rotate around. Just a little nugget that I thought about as we were talking about it today. So, but he was really good at finishing in a good feeler's position. So we had to come up with a plan. So here's what we did to address the physical constraints. Once you have the assessment done, guys, listen. if you're not assessing your pitchers, I don't know how you're helping them with their training plan. If you don't, the assessment writes the training plan for me. Once the assessment is done, if you find all the possible constraints, which we have renamed significant opportunities for improvement, if you find that, then it's a matter of just filling in the blanks and saying, if I have these things that are limiting this pitcher's ability to progress, all I have to do is have 3 to 6 drills, and by the way, that's what Superhuman Volume 3 will be about. It's the 3 to 6 drills that we match to the things that we find in the assessments that will correct those inefficiencies. And then you have this this block of stone that's already throwing 90 plus. He's already a dominant pitcher, and all you have to do is carve away the constraints like Michelangelo carving on the David, and then you got this beautiful sculpture at the end. So this was Dom's plan. I'm not going to go through item by item, but this was his periscapular strengthening, shoulder mobility. We had him do those stretches and exercises. Next one. We had to address his thoracic mobility, hip mobility with all those stretches, and we just incorporated those into his routine. And then we did the functional movement constraint. The actual FMS comes with corrective drills and exercises. We had him do some of those. Next slide. And then as far as his throwing program, okay, we had to get him on a throwing program to correct things we found on the video analysis. So we started with the only thing that he could do. What we found, and we had just started with these holds now, and I found that when I gave him a 7-ounce ball, and I said, okay, throw it, but don't let go. And I go, did that hurt? And he said, no, it didn't hurt. I'm like, all right, cool. We got something you can do because we got to do something, right? So so we knew we needed to work on his deceleration pattern. So for 3 weeks, we put him on a bench, and he came in 4 times a week, and he worked out with us for 2.5 hours. Our sessions were about 2.5 hours long. We got a warm up, we got our throwing segment, and then we got our motor building workout, and then we got our cool down. And he spent the whole throwing segment on a bench doing decel for about 3 weeks, okay? And he couldn't throw a ball, so all he did was hang on to the ball. And he fell in love with it. He came in and trained with us 4 times a week at 8 o'clock in the morning for 2.5 hours, and then he would get off of, he would finish his training, and he would take, now he started, he's the kind of kid, once you get to know Dom, he's the kind of kid, if a little's good, a lot is better, right? So he immediately grabbed the 2-pound ball and said, all right, I'm going to use this. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about it, so use whatever you want, And listen, honestly, our best ideas come from our students. They do. They just tell us, and I ask them, how does that feel? What do you like? And they just tell us what they want to do. So for 2.5 hours, he would go to work at his brother's construction site. His brother owned a construction company. He'd picking up nails and lifting boards and stuff. And he had this ball, and he told me that 100 times a day, he would just do a little shuffle hold and hang on to that 2-pound ball. He did 100 of them a day, and I'm like, how you feel? He goes, pretty good. I go, all right, keep doing it. And because I'm smart like that sometimes. Okay, next. All right, good. So within 3 weeks, his pain has subsided, and he was able to get into the routine, the regular throwing program that we do. And his performance improved, his velocity increased. He worked with us, honest to goodness, he came in for 16 weeks in a row, 4 times per week. Next slide. And then this happened. In August of 2012, remember he started in April of 2012. I don't know if you guys can see that, but that radar gun says 91.5. That was on a live pitch off the mound, okay? 91.5. So topping out at 76 in April, pain-free, and topping out at 91.5 in August. Okay, go to the next slide. So he was our guinea pig. He was our test pilot, but we knew that it was a work in progress, okay? And I started reading Kyle Bodie's post about how maybe holding onto the ball was creating a negative blend. And I did notice that when our guys held the ball and they did the throw and they didn't let go of it, it looked weird. It looked awkward, And so I said, all right, well, I'm really only concerned about the decel component, the end of it. So we're going to change and not even do the drawback motion. We're not even going to try an arm action thing. We're just going to start like a bow and arrow, and we're just going to work on the end because all I care about is that end. All I'm caring about is that decel. So let's focus on that. And then we did that for a while, and again, it still looked awkward. So I asked the guys, I go, fellas, I asked a bunch of our guys, why does this look so funky when you guys do it? And a few of them said, here's the deal. When I hold a ball that weighs more than a baseball, and I'm going to try to throw it and let go of it, we have a little small room. I mean, we got 2,000 square feet that we train in, and it's perfectly adequate, but they're always worried that they're going to let go of the ball, and it's going to fly off and break a wall or hit somebody in the head. And so they were trying to hang on to this weighted ball, and it was really changing the way they do things. So I said, all right, we got to figure out a way to make it more natural. So I started thinking about the tennis racket. And I thought, okay, what can I use? Because I can't have a bunch of tennis rackets in here. So I took the weighted ball and I went to Sports Authority and I bought a soccer sock, right? And I just dropped it into the sock, right? And so I said, all right, let's try this, because we're experimental. We just try to figure things out. And so they grabbed the sock, and I said, we're going to have to choke up on it a little bit because the ceiling's only 8 feet tall, so we're going to hit the ceiling if we don't. So they took their sock, and they would throw it, and it looked better. It looked more natural. I had one problem. They were all going home with bruised ribs in the back. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work either. Jeez, okay. So, but now they're not afraid of losing the ball, so we had to progress. Now, also, we had another problem. All the balls, different weights, are different colors. Well, I thought, okay, red, black are our theme for our colors, right? So I bought all red socks, right? And so when we go to pick up the size of ball that we're going to use, we had to go, what size is that ball? And we'd weigh it. And so my 12-year-old godson was in there training with us. Next slide. He said, hey, you know what? You should color code those socks. I'm like, well, that's brilliant. So I made another trip back to Sports Authority, and we got color-coded socks. So this is what our one little area of our place looks like. They're all color-coded. Next slide. Now we had to figure out a way to hold it so they wouldn't get hit in the back. So here's our patented, high-tech, MacGyver-style sock holds, okay? Here's what we do. You hold it like this. You wrap it around your wrist a few times, and then you take it off your hand and you tuck that in, right? Tuck it in right there. You can tuck it twice if you want. And then you hold the ball with your 2 fingers, and you take the sock in these 2 little fingers. See, like that? You don't let go with the 2 little fingers. You just hang on. And so what you end up with, it turns itself into like a mini bell club. It's like a little lightweight bell club. And some of my guys can't handle the heavy 2-pound bell club, so they do this. And so you throw it, and you get that. And now we got a little tiny bell club here, and we call these sock holds, and that's how we do it. Now, next slide. So here's how we use sock holds in our program, okay? We have 3 different protocols. I get 3 different types of people that come in, okay? First, we use it in pre- and post-throwing strengthening, okay? Like I said, we have our warm-up, we have our throwing segment, we have our workout segment, and we have our cool-down. So I couldn't figure out where to get it in, so we just started doing it right after we do our dynamic warm-up. We do about 20 to 40, and there's no number. They do whatever they feel like doing, okay? Of these sock holds. We do some of them on the wall. I think I saw this drill, Paul read it, a wall drill where you get off the wall to work on engaging your pelvis early. And then we do shuffle holds because that's what I saw when I was crying over my ice cream bowl, and that's what they did, okay? So shuffle holds and wall holds, we'll do pre and post throwing. Sometimes they like to do the holds right after they finish their throwing segment with all their drills and everything. Sometimes they like to wait till after the workout and do it. And sometimes they just skip it all together and go right to the arm care, okay? We also have a bunch of guys, we use rehabilitation and post-injury guys that come from my physical therapy clinic. We also do what we call a deceleration or recovery day, okay? Go to the next slide. So like I said, we do the functional strengthening just on routine guys before they start their throwing or either after or both. We start with a 7-ounce ball, and every 2 weeks we let them progress from the 7-ounce to the 14 to the 21-ounce ball. So we gradually increase the size of the ball. I don't really let guys go to the 2-pound ball anymore. Some of our older guys do because they still like it. But to me, if those muscles that we're trying to address are really small, the teres minor, teres major, the infraspinatus, the rotator cuff muscles are really small. And if we use a heavy implement, I think we might overwhelm the smaller muscles, and then the deltoids and the traps come into play. And so I don't think we get that inert stabilization that we're looking for right around the labrum and the rotator cuff. So we stick with the lighter weights, and anybody younger than anybody that's not musculoskeletally developed never advances past the 7-ounce ball. Okay, they all only use the red. So little guys only get to use the red ball. And so how do you determine? Go next slide, please. If a guy is musculoskeletally ready or not? Dr. Coco Eaton is a Tampa Bay Rays team physician, and I've spoken to him and I've scrubbed in on a few surgeries with him, and we have this pretty good relationship. He sends me patients either after surgery or if they've gotten a tweak in the elbow or the shoulder and they don't need surgery yet and he's trying to keep them off the operating table, he'll send them to me. But I was in his office the other day and we were talking about this whole thing about how to determine whether you can really let a guy go after velocity or not, like whether you can really let it eat and chase it. At what age is it okay? And he hit me with like a big boulder in the head with this one. He said, you don't have to get x-rays to determine if their growth plates are closed. You can be pretty sure that the growth plates are closed with what he called the Adam's apple test. And I said, what is that? He goes, look, you turn them to the side. The last thing to evolve in the puberty process is a man's Adam's apple. He said, look, if you can see their Adam's apple emerging, there's a pretty good chance they're done growing. How about this for recruiting? If you're going to see if you're going to sign 15-year-olds, right? If we're going to commit 15-year-olds and we're going to look at them, if they got an Adam's apple, that's as big as they're going to get, okay? And so I was like, well, that's pretty, so there you go. I learned something last week with that, okay? But what I noticed is that with physical therapy, we were getting lots of patients in for years, but the insurance companies will only pay for you to reduce the inflammation, reduce the pain, right? And to get them to where they can scratch their head and reach back into their wallet to take it out of their back pocket. After that, the insurance company says discharge, but we got elite athletes that are getting back to throwing. The insurance company doesn't care. So what do we usually do? We give them a little return to throwing program from the ASMI or whoever, and we say, go do this reps, this rep, this rep, this rep. And then they go back to their team, and they're throwing with the exact same movement pattern, the exact same physical constraints that got them hurt in the first place, and they don't change anything. So we're missing a huge step there that we have to bridge. We have to be able to take those guys and send them to someone who knows how to manage their movement pattern and to change it, to alter it so that they're less at risk of being injured. So some of our guys, oh, by the way, here's my suck up to the host segment right here, and I will do this shamelessly as well. Listen, if you haven't gotten this right here, this Coach Wolforth Solve Your Disconnection series, it changed everything for us because now, in 21 days, we got a guy with a problem. We can see that he's got an arm action issue that's going to put him at risk. I can't let him chase velocity until he gets it out of the way. It's not going to be safe. In 21 days, we put him on one of those protocols. They're better. They come back. We videotape them. It's gone. It's amazing. I promise you, and I'm not just saying that because I'm standing here on his stage. That's the best thing I've ever purchased, and it didn't cost me $455. Okay, but because we are able to see these kind of rehab type patients, we put connection balls in there, and we try to use the connection balls to pattern their movements. And since they can't throw yet, and they can't handle like the bell clubs or anything like that, we're able to drop connection balls and things like that in there to where we can pattern in a pain-free motion and still work on our movement pattern to try to correct it as we do their rehab. Okay, next one. And then finally, oh, here's some of our guys doing weighted ball holds with connection balls. There's Mike, who has an elevated distal humerus issue, anterior shoulder pain. Brian, the second guy in, had a medial elbow. He had a UCL partial tear that Dr. Eaton sent us, and so all he ever did was a connection ball here and holds until he could do it pain-free, until he could throw pain-free. Charlie missed a whole season about 2 years ago with a medial elbow issue, and the guy on the end, Blake, had some ulnar neuritis, and so they had to do all of their weighted ball drills with connection balls. So we were able to sort of blend those things together. Next slide. And then this is a really cool thing. We have a hard time with what we call periodization, right? Trying to find that off season where we can train. And in Florida, I told you it's 82 and sunny today. So our guys play every single day. They never have a time where they come into me and I got 6 to 12 weeks to work with them where they don't have a game. They're always being interrupted by games. And so every guy that comes in gets a sheet, and I ask him, he fills it out when he walks in the door. It says, A, do you have any pain? Rated on a 0 to 10 scale. If you do, where is it? And then I ask him, when's the last time you pitched in a game? How many pitches did you throw? When do you anticipate that you're going to have to pitch again? And so we have different protocols that we use based on that data. If they haven't pitched in a while, I'll let them do a velo day where we chase velocity. If they're in between and they're going to start maybe later in the week, they might do a command day, and we have different kinds of command days. We use our target pad for horizontal, vertical, and diagonal commands. We have our command trainers, which we keep out back in our bullpen, which someone stole the other day, but that's a different story. We use command trainers, or we have EV command day. Or if a guy's got a disconnection in medial elbow or a forearm flat or elevated distal humerus, then we'll have a movement pattern day. But really, if they've pitched recently and they can't throw today, we put them on what we call our decel and recovery day. They do a whole day of just decelerations, pronations, and marshals with all holds. And what I'm finding is that after they throw, it's a really great recovery program. They're reporting less soreness and they rebound quicker with their best stuff. Okay, next slide. So we talked about the story of Dom, and I wish we had the volume on this because the sound from the other guys in the room, just if you can hit the volume button as loud as it will go, maybe they'll get a little bit. And now you're going to have to use the cursor. Here's how this story ends with Dom in July of this year on a tournament. Did you guys hear that? That's Dom, 101.1 on a turn and burn there. So that's our test pilot. Dom actually is one of our interns now. He works for me in exchange for free training and does some of my classes with me. It's been a great success story. So that's all I have on holds. It's not something that we took a scientific approach to. We just got feedback from our players and we used it the best we could. And it's been pretty successful for us. And that's all. Any time for questions or anything? Or?
We're gonna break for lunch, and if anybody wants to ask him a question, just come on up. But let's give him a hand. That was fantastic.